Good evening, and welcome back to the weird and the wonderful with Strange Bones. That's me. We are starting our next live, and I have the associated cat to keep us warm. You gotta have a cat if you're gonna do supernatural. So I have a cat who is currently dominating everything and wanting attention. So let's begin. You're going to help me. You're going to tell me all the secrets of witchcraft. Yes. Apparently, the cat is here. So let's begin. And welcome to Endless Thoughts. Yes, I am here with Munchkin. Munchkin is the master of all things esoteric. So we are in hope that there will be there will be some influence in improving the life. And as promised, we are absolutely going to look at Brazil. So good evening to you, and hopefully we can find out some very, very interesting things. Now, in terms of Brazil, so in Brazil, the concept of witches and witchcraft often blends European folklore with African folklore and indigenous traditions, resulting in quite a diverse range of beliefs and practices. Now, you have bruxeria, which is your witchcraft, which can include folk medicine, herbalism, spiritual rituals, and is sometimes associated with candomblé, which is the Brazilian version of Santeria, which is the Latin American version of voodoo, and is quite different to other forms of voodoo. Now, we also need to make note that, again, the term bruxa or witch can also refer to a kind of vampire in Iberian folklore, which also affects the things. Now, as we begin, we're going to start off by the usual housekeeping we begin with. So, welcome to all who have joined. And bear in mind that we have only one rule on this channel, and that is be polite. You can agree, you can disagree, you can do all of the accepting or not accepting of what is being said. And bear in mind as well, as we have discovered that on this particular topic, we are talking about viewpoints as much as we are about the thing, because they affect very, very greatly and are very important in that regard. So we do not promote or disparage any particular belief or system, because we are not going to be rude about it. But we don't necessarily promote neither. Now, much thanks to those who have given all the likes and the gifts and the hearts and the more. Remember, we rely on you guys, so like, share, subscribe, and do all of the good things to help promote the channel, because it matters. And comment as much as you would like. And as I say, absolutely, if you would like to join, and be part of the live, you are welcome to, as long as you keep to that one rule. But with that said, let's begin. Now, we've discovered that if you're trying to characterize what a witch is, it's very, very difficult to do that because the different viewpoints and the very, very varied practices all around. But we've worked it down to the fact and the form more than what is usually used to describe by a lot of people, including practitioners, where they are more interested in style. But fact and form. So we can consider things to fall into three main general categories of witchcraft. That it could be what we would call the psychic, whereby all abilities are derived from the practitioner themselves. This is often not considered to be witchcraft exactly, but referred to as psychic abilities rather. The second category is spiritual, whereby deities are not necessarily involved and one works with varying spirits and things. And then, of course, you have the theocentric versions, where it is a form of religion. Whether or not you accept it as a religion or whether or not it is a good or a bad religion is another question entirely. So that's our basic look for now, as we begin with our consideration. So we're in Brazil, South America, Latin America. And Brazilian witchcraft is characterized by the blending of quite a few cultures in making what it is. Folklore plays quite a large part as well, and you will find strange figures and cryptids that get involved, like Cuca, the alligator-headed witch that abducts disobedient children. Now, Endless Thoughts has pointed out that Brazilians still practice magic, for example, sacrificing animals, and that is true. It's certainly the case that not all views and religions are things of history, but are often quite current as well and have grown. Now, practices that we can talk about do include things such as I've said, candomblé and macumba, which involve rituals and beliefs, and they are very much kind of a religion, despite all, though they are referred to as witchcraft, especially by the Catholic Church. And we've also discovered in considering the craft that we need to look at it from both sides. There is the view had by the practitioners of what it is, which sometimes is in direct contrast to the view had by those outside that particular practice or belief. So you might find, for example, a modern neo-pagan Wiccan saying, no, but a witch is a good person, they do good things. And from their perspective, that's one view. But we need to keep in mind as well that there are those outside who might consider it automatically to be evil and terrible for varying reasons, usually religious. So the two sides of the argument will affect how it is seen within society, and that is also very important. We do know that you get a number of important people within the belief. I believe the Crave the Curacao, which is a traditional healer, which are very often women using medicinal herbs and other remedies, who also sometimes face accusation of witchcraft. Thank you very much, Endless Thoughts. Yes, I'm enjoying it immensely, and I've got to say, I particularly enjoy the comments that you bring to it. There's a lot of thought experiments that go on because there is so much to learn and so much to say. I think that it makes the world a far richer place to know about these things, good or bad. Now, we can also say that there are problems when accusations of witchcraft come up, and it has historically led to all kinds of trouble for the practitioner, including even as far as execution. So it's not the kind of thing that should be lightly considered. And in fact, we have cases such as that of Maria de Conceição, who was executed for heresy and witchcraft. Uh, Modern interpretations of brujeria often involve a mix of traditional knowledge and personal exploration with a focus on individual meanings and practices. But we do need to start talking to a certain degree as to what actually we are even talking about. And the first thing we're going to mention is macumba, which is a term which is often used in a derogatory fashion to describe the various Afro-Brazilian religions and practices which are associated with sorcery and black magic. Huge thanks for the likes there. It's a broad term, however, encompassing a range of beliefs and rituals, and it's not always used with precision. Um, we find, as is often the case with these particular beliefs, that they are far less regulated as many formal modern religions are. So you will get variations even within a single culture. And most people, scholars at least, will say that the term is used for the practices perceived as involving feitiçaria, or sorcery, and black magic, particularly. Macumba originates from African languages, West African in general, meaning magic or ritual. The usage has been used to refer to quite a few of the Afro-Brazilian religions, but usually for the black magic ones. Because of that, its association tends to be very negative. Now, within the context of some places, it can also refer to somebody who is a liar, which shows the negative connections that are had in this regard. Now, you will find that it is related to Umbanda, which is considered to be a more sophisticated and organized practice that has gained popularity among the middle class, while Macumba is associated with the more ignorant and common rural types, which might not be a fair description at all, but we shall see. And remember, social viewpoint makes a big deal. Umbanda is a Brazilian religion that synthesizes elements from the African traditions, such as those from the Yoruba in West Africa, Spiritism, and, most interesting, Catholicism. It centers on the belief in a supreme God, but there are also various other deities called orishas, and a hierarchy of spirits that act as intermediaries between the humans and the divine. Umbanda also incorporates concepts of reincarnation, mediumship, with practitioners believing that every individual has the potential to be a medium. Now, we do also note that in a number of forms of voodoo, you particularly get complicated sigils and things that are used. And apparently, in Afro Brazilian versions, this is not the case. they have a number of other methods instead. So there are strong variations to traditional voodoo. So that needs to be kept in mind as well. The key deities include Olorum, which is the supreme god, the creator, as it were. And then the Orishas are considered to be lesser deities, each associated with specific natural elements, human characteristics, and areas of life. These deities are not worshipped as independent entities, but as aspects or manifestations of Olorum. So that changes the traditional voodoo very greatly. There is also a hierarchy to the spirits, including ancestral spirits and entities associated with the specific orishas. These spirits are believed to interact with the living, offering guidance, healing, and protection. So they are important to the individual. And this is something that has turned up that I've noted in a number of the very traditional type religions, whereby while the supreme God is believed in, it is often the case that they are considered to be too far above humanity or too important to be directly dealt with or contacted. And in that regard, therefore, you need to talk to the orishas and such in order to deal with it. Is ek dors? Ja, meneer, 'n mens moet op 'n koue nag 'n lekker koffie hê, né? For those of you who don't speak Afrikaans, he was asking if I was thirsty, and yes, you've got to have a hot coffee on a cold night. So, another thing which is quite important, like Spiritism, Umbanda incorporates the concept of reincarnation, believing that souls go through multiple lifetimes in order to learn and evolve. Now, from my understanding of the original religions among the Yoruba and such, this is not a concept that is from there and has been brought in from other religious beliefs. So it's certainly become a grown thing in that regard. Now, practices, Umbanda rituals involve music, dance, offerings, and spirit communications. And these ceremonies are typically held in the tereos, which is a kind of temple, which again is not traditional from original voodoo. And they are led by the father or mother de santo, which is the spiritual leader in that regard. So we find what we would refer to as a number of primitive ceremonies. And I remind you again, primitive is not referring to simple or stupid, but rather in the sense of primal, as in old. So it comes from older methods of dealing with religious and magical practice. As we progress, though, we do need to talk about the difference of things. Now, Endless Thoughts brought up the point, which is quite correct, that there are sacrifices made. Now, in at least open society, generally sacrifices are not made in terms of living things, partly because these days it's considered to be something that is illegal or criminal. You can't go around chopping up living things. So openly, it tends to be gifts of foods, tobacco, alcohol is popular, and so on and so forth, which is great. However, this is not to say on the quiet other things do not happen, particularly among those who follow the darker practices. So we need to look at that as well. So we know that they are built or created syncretic religions. So here it is known as Candomblé, but it is basically the cousin of Santeria, which you will find in a number of the other countries. So in this case, by and large, it's a name thing to do with language and what have you. Now, we know that European witchcraft beliefs have influenced the traditions very much so. The bringing over of slaves from Africa absolutely did as well. Much thanks for the share there, my dear. But nevertheless, there is a negative viewpoint as well among the society. So a male practitioner, a brujo, or a female practitioner, a bruja, which is kind of in keeping with the languages where things are genitive in that regard. And we know that sometimes the bruja or bruja, or the practitioner of brujeria, is considered to be evil, and in that regard is accused and often even attacked for this. And in colonial Mexico, for example, the Mexican Inquisition did actually happen. The Spanish inquisitors that were there in Mexico treated witchcraft accusations as a religious problem that could be resolved through confession and absolution, which is a lot softer than happened in a number of other countries in that regard. So it wasn't taken so hard by the church itself. Belief in witchcraft is a constant in the history of colonial Brazil, and several denunciations and confessions given to the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith of Bahia, Pernambuco, and Paraíba show this quite strongly. We do know that there are views where the worry was less about the craft and who did it, and it seems in many ways there was a social aspect, can I say, because a number of the accusations were actually against European and indigenous women accused of collaborating to work love magic or sexual witchcraft against men, which seems to imply that it wasn't so much about the using of the magic as it was where women were stepping out of their bounds, which is considered not to be a good thing at all. Now, we know that over the whole setup, you've got versions of voodoo that have come up in a number of different places, and you have the Haitian voodoo, which is really quite creepy, Cuban Santeria, Brazilian Candomblé, as well as Ubanda. So what sets the witches of Latin America apart from their European counterparts is that the blend of religiosity and spirituality has made them very unique in their growth in that regard. So in Brazil, we're talking Candomblé and Umbanda. Brazilian brujos use the orishas, as well as other spirits, and there is both healing ceremonies as well as magic work. So, a number of different sorts of things. Um, we know that in the 1500s, the Archbishop of Santo Domingo, the fifth bishop of Puerto Rico, Nicolas Ramos, recorded his recollections of the black brujos, male and female, engaged with the devil in the shape of a goat, and this in front of this ghost every night cursed God, Santa Maria, and the sacraments of the Holy Church. Now, this shows the other side, whether or not it was true that they did that, or if that was part of the practices, isn't the point. What is the point is that it was considered to be like that by society, and particularly by those who were of importance and influence in society, which gives you a view of how it was seen, which is also very important. Um, and Ramos wrote, asserting that they did not have nor believe in a god other than that of the devil. They performed these rituals in fields, particularly in a trance, not in dreams, since there were people that saw them. These people tried to make the sorcerers refrain from their doings through chanting and holy gifts, and with all of this information, they came to me. This perpetual demonization of the elements of African worship set up the forefront of the centuries of demonization of the brujeria practices. Now, basically, what that means in short is everybody automatically saw these things as bad. They were considered to be evil because they simply were not Catholic, and that was a very common response. Whether or not the actual practitioners were bad or not didn't matter. Now, we know that between the 16th and the 19th centuries, there were a number of people that came over from Africa as well. And were forced to convert to Christianity by the imposing church and the overseeing haciendados, the landowners, and branded slaves were baptized in order to be recognized properly as um, the property. Actually, that's an interesting comment. Uh, there was an animal sacrifice that was done, and in fact, it was done in accordance with a number of Catholic priests, um, where it was supposed to be an improved syncretism of the African viewpoint with the Catholic faith. And it raised a huge amount of backlash within the church. A lot of people never saw the arguments that came up. I was actually, when it first happened, I was studying at the time and was a monk. And the arguments that came up were incredible because a number of the African students said that no, but that's fine, it should work. But then again, uh, it was in direct contrast to the understanding that the sacrifice of Christ was the be all and end all. That was the whole point. So, in other words, the doing of it was in direct opposition to Christ himself. And yeah, it did not go down well at all within the church in general. Um, and I believed that after a certain amount of time, a lot of it was sort of carefully brushed aside and covered up because people just didn't want to have to face up to it. Um, it caused a lot of trouble. Um, and at the end of the day, I think that's one of the problems that will always arrive whenever you try to change the a very established religion, whether or not it's a good or a bad thing at all. And we know from the past, whenever that's happened, you've ended up with an offshoot breaking off. I mean, that was exactly how the Lutheran Church started, when Luther famously said, no, but some of these practices that you're doing are not right, and it should be done otherwise. You ended up with a split in the church. Um, so, right there, you can immediately see that these things are very deep seated. And unfortunately for Malema, um, and indeed his attempt, it upset a lot of people. Because when it comes to the sacrifice of a living thing, there's a huge number of people against that are within South African society. And right away, that just made an enemy of all of them. Um, it's not something that any important public figure should ever do when you're in a massively multicultural country like South Africa, because the impact is huge. And yeah, that led to problems. So yeah, you are quite correct. It did happen more than once, and it was not good. It was not good at all. I think as a political statement, uh, it really alienated a lot of the people for a lot of reasons. And I'm not saying that, if it's really part of your religion and within your religion it's a good thing, uh, that's one thing. But as a public figure, it's a very different thing, and you have to be so, so, so careful in that regard. So I do remember that there was a huge argument in Sandton when a number of quite rich African people bought property in what was before very much a white area, and a very high class white area. And on getting their new house, they wanted to bless their house and get the ancestors in, which, as you can imagine, was very traditional. But the neighbors had a problem with the fact that they slaughtered a cow right in the front yard and then mounted the head on a post in the front yard. And yet, you can imagine Sandton High Society dealing with that. It went south at a rapid rate and caused huge problems because, look, on the one hand, quite rightly, the people that moved in said, hey, it's my property, I bought it, and this is my religion. You can't stop me from bringing my ancestors into my new home, which is arguably a point. However, I've known numerous occasions where you've had such culture clashes over things like that, and I believe that one of the houses in the street was owned by a fairly hardcore Hindu, and of course, seriously vegetarian and sanctity of, and all the rest of it. And as you can imagine, that went south so fast. And then, of course, all the 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 very upper class, prissy types that they could not handle. They really could not. So, absolutely, you're totally correct. And huge thanks to Endless Thoughts. She's just achieved us a live goal with her very generous gift of a donut. So, thank you very much for that. But moving along, and with the Brazilian version, um, we see that Brujeria is a mix. So your practices involve saints, uh, Catholic saints, who are representative of orishas, and I don't know them all, I'm going to be blunt with you, but certain saints are the equivalent of certain specific orishas. Um, so that is very much a connection there. The Brujas have taken on Catholic traits, even though the Catholic Church straight up they're evil, they're demonic. And this demonization is carried on in some places, less so in others. Persecution is rife, and arguments over that, even in the modern day, is absolutely rife and causes quite a bit of social conflict in that regard. But people go ahead anyway. Um, and in fact, the more conflict that there is, the more that these locals cling to their uh, cultural nationalism and their views of what they are allowed, with the Taino and Afro Boricua uh, beliefs and things. Um, and the more it's denounced, the less it seems to have an effect on it. Uh, so, how important is it? Very. Now, what practice does it actually entail? Because we're here to examine witchcraft for that very reason. It does not participate in community, hierarchical, or initiation based practice for membership, as many religions do. We know if you want to be a Christian, you must be baptized. Within the Catholic Church, you go through your baptism, first communion, confirmation, all the rest. They do not do that. Rituals are independent on the procedures, practices, and attitudes, and are passed down by its participants, often within the family. They heavily depend on the forces of nature and the spontaneity of the spirits, following specific guidelines and doctrines um, that are dependent on even just specific families, even. But there are a number of basic commonalities. So, a number of basic ritual gestures, communication during divination, possession, and specific components of altars. These similarities are what is a kind of spiritual lingua franca, as it were, which explains the ubiquity of the practice all across the Afro Latino diaspora. In practice, the Bruges stress not to believe the ritualistic objects or to hold too much pertinence in the material representations of the spiritual entities, but rather to the focus of blah, 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 blah. Let's try that in English. But rather focus on the messages and the powers of the entities that inhabit the icons that are also used to summon ancient beings, be they deities, saints, spirits, or other supernatural beings. So the power is sensed and manifested when the voices of the spiritist entities, the uh, orishas, and the recently deceased are brought on by the rituals, the divination, the trance, and the makings of the magical works. The spirit's abstract means of revelation include through emotions, varying senses, and through healings as a means to transform the emotional, proprioceptive, and to some extent physiological states of the participants. Now, whereas a lot of the focus in the practice of Brujeria is on the technological systems, Brujeria within it focuses mostly on the interpersonal client-patient power that emerges during the healing, divination, or magic rituals that challenges the assumed precondition in regards health, labor, family relations, and even career management. So, On the outside, people are worried about what is done and how you do the different things, which is very often the case, if you will, in other religions. But within Brujeria, they don't really worry too much about it. They are far more worried with the workings of it, the how it's changed the practitioner. So Brujos and practitioners of Brujeria never question the spirits. The performative methods of surrender training is the only lesson that the Brujos aim to teach. The expectation is to have faith in the spirits, and the spirits will reveal what is meant to be revealed. You must believe, in other words, and that is far more important than. Now, how are these varied things seen, if that's the case? Well, it depends. The different orishas can, by and large, appear in a great many ways. They can appear as saints, they can appear in the more traditional voodoo forms. So, how they are shown varies greatly, and as the Brujeria will tell you it, that doesn't matter. They are there, they are powerful, you must do as they say. Now, looking at one such interesting thing, some of the characters that turn up. So Endless Thought says they have magical candles, and every different candle is a different spell. Yes, they are, and in fact, the candles are not only a thing in and of themselves, but they need to be treated differently, and the candles have to be anointed very much so. Does South Africa have candles? Again, it depends entirely on the practice. In the traditional style of the sort of shamanistic type beliefs, no, candles are not a thing at all. Modern neo-paganism uses candles and the colors matter, and to a certain degree, the anointing with specific oils can be a factor, but it isn't always. Whereas in Candomblé, absolutely it's a very big deal. There's a number of different specialized oils that you will have to use. They are set up on the altar and must actually be treated in a number of different ways, offerings laid before them, and so on and so forth. As in many ways, I get the impression, looking at it, that the candles are the representation, as it were, of the Orisha itself, and therefore the offerings and treatment of the candle is representative of the offering and treatment of the Orisha itself. So it's far, far more used and far more important in Candomblé than in most other religions, actually. The only other religion that really makes a big deal about candles, ironically, is Catholicism. You have the votive candles used hugely, especially in Latin America, but in all countries. And of course, you have the very, very important Easter candle and the candles on the altar, which are all very important. So that's a massive deal. And you see this taken even further with Candomblé. Huge thanks to Endless Thoughts for all the shares there. I really do appreciate. And yeah, so Candomblé is probably the biggest candle using religion Santeria as well, of course, but that's the other name for it in the other. Remember, in Latin America, you have Spanish in certain places and you have Portuguese in others. So names change a bit dependent on the specific language. And we're dealing with Portuguese here, not Spanish, which may or may not be important. So let's look at one of the other things. So, one of the weird and rather unsettling characters. Yes, I would love that actually. Thank you for sharing with your Brazilian followers. I'd love to hear their views on this. But one of the big creepies, as it were, is Cuca, a compelling and formidable figure renowned for her terrifying aura and association with childhood anxieties. Cuca has established herself as a prominent element in Brazilian cultural narratives. So, looking at that, Cuca is a mythical entity frequently portrayed as a witch or a terrifying old woman, which is pretty much the same. Um, and in various narratives that she has been described as a woman with reptilian characteristics, or is envisioned as a creature resembling a crocodile, possessing the power to transform. Unlike numerous folkloric beings tied to specific location or items, Kuka is predominantly feared for a tendency to abduct misbehaving children or those who stay up too late. Um, Similar to a bogeyman in Western folklore, she serves as quite a daunting figure to discipline children. But now its origin is intertwined with a fusion of Brazilian, indigenous, African, and Portuguese legends. So, quite a few different things mixing together. And interestingly, as well, one of the key elements that seems to come up in a lot of places with witchcraft is the ability to transform. Now, we know when we did the USA, we spoke of those creatures that a witch could become when they turn into a skinwalker. Okay, that's cool. Não falia português. Mas if you do translate for them or for us from them, that would be great. My Portuguese is truly terrible. So on that point, I am learning as a matter of fact, but very, very slowly, I'm afraid. Um, I'm having a go at learning on, what's it called? Duolingo. But yeah, I'm not very good. I also understand that the Brazilian Portuguese is quite different in some ways to um, original Portuguese. So pronunciations and more can be difficult, but we will work with it as much as we can. So, quite a lot of the Brazilian folklore frequently features characters that are two sided, both alluring and menacing. Um, so, Kuka's resemblance to reptiles or crocodiles uh, reflects the perilous creatures that inhabit the Brazilian jungles and rivers, as well as to represent the enigmatic and fearsome aspects of nature. And one of the most intriguing elements is her role as a tool for parenting. In Brazilian families, Cuca is frequently referenced to motivate children. So she's had quite a lasting impact on people and on popular culture within um, Brazilian society and turns up in all kinds of literature, television, and music. So these things turn up all the time. It's apparently a very well known thing. We saw you on YouTube. Oh, wow. I am deeply impressed. Thank you for that, Archibald. I would love to know where. I'm trying to remember which stuff I did that side. But yeah, thank you for that. So you will find her turning up in lullabies for children. And of course, if you look at the non-Disney lullabies and fairy tales and things from around the world, quite often they're pretty horrific. Some of them can really be kind of nasty. I'm just throwing it out there. The original Brother Grimm stories that Disney has made ever so cutesy and sweetsy really did not end well for anybody. So it's not surprising that Kuka is used in lullabies and is nevertheless pretty awful. She's all about discipline and, of course, is a bruja. And in fact, there we go. I've got a picture just for you. If I can figure out correctly how to pop it up, I will attempt to do that. Because after all, we do love a good picture of something fearsome and awful. So let's just drop you there and there and there and there and there. I do love technology. So for your suitable horror, and it doesn't come out terribly well at all, but there is a part at least of the large crocodile-like with skulls adorning and a giant crocodile head that you can't see that absolutely is Kuka. Baltarj, Estian and Ardis, ¿cómo está? So let's go back a little bit to Candomblé. And I'm probably pronouncing these things very badly. I'm not even going to lie. So I apologize if I am, because as I say, my Portuguese is frightening. And it does seem that practitioners will, within the varied forms and types, even dress up in order to look like specific orishas in some of the rituals. So there's a varying selection of ways in which these things are done. So it goes beyond just the standard type. Now, to give you an example of this particular thing, se você é do Brasil, gostaríamos de fazer algumas perguntas. Let's see. You are welcome to ask me questions. I'm going to say to you that my ability to answer is going to very much be in English because I am not from Brazil. I am from South Africa and I'm doing my talks in English. But as we say, those who have joined in, ask away even in Portuguese, and we will translate and do our best to give you an answer. And if we struggle, we have Google Translate to play with, just so as you know. I'm going to add a picture to show you somebody who is apparently, I'm not an expert, but apparently dressed up as the Orisha Oba, and that is from Brazil. So we must remember as well, one of the specific things that is very particular in terms of voodoo, of all its varieties, which is not common at all um, in other forms of witchcraft, though it is used, but lesser. But in voodoo, it's used all the time and a lot, is the fact of participants or sometimes the leaders of the particular ceremonies being possessed voluntarily. Um, in many religions, possession is considered to be a very, very bad thing. Um, in a number of the other practices, it is occasionally used, but is considered quite dangerous. However, within all of the voodoo practices, whether it is proper voodoo, Haitian voodoo, Santeria, Candomblé, possession is the name of the game, and it's considered to be a very good thing and a great honor. And they will refer to it as you becoming the horse of the Orishas. So absolutely, it's a big deal. So apparently my pronunciation is truly awful because it should be pronounced not candomblé, but kidoblé, apparently. But again, as I say, I'm very much not very good at the pronunciation. So we know that even Keroble comes from the Yoruba, Bantu, and Be African side. The local traditional religions within Brazil, and very strongly Roman Catholicism. There is no central authority to it at all, which makes it very changeable all over the place. We know that there are specific orishas that are linked to specific Roman Catholic saints, and every individual has a tutelary orisha that has been connected to them since before birth, who informs their personality in varying ways. They do have their terios, the temples where you can meet up. There's the Mai de Santo and the Pai de Santo, so you will have a priestess or a priest, or both. Both are possible. The central ritual is drumming, singing, and dancing in an attempt to encourage an Orisha to possess one of the members with whom the congregants can then interact. The Orishas are given offerings such as fruit and here we have what Endless Thoughts did point out, sacrificed animals as well. And while their will is deciphered through divination, offerings may also be given to the lesser spirits, including the Kaboslos and the spirits of the dead, the Egun. Healing rituals and the preparation of amulets and herbal remedies, which we absolutely do know are very, very big in all forms of voodoo, are very much important here as well. Keroble developed among the Afro-Brazilian communities amid the Atlantic slave trade. We know this. There were quite a lot of things that caused the mix, and as we know, it has developed into an entirely new religion, which is the modern and cleaner version, so to speak, of Umbanda. Now, the most interesting denominations within it depends on its actual traditional original African belief system that had the primary influence. So you do get different versions of Keroble, uh, whether it came from the Ketu, Jeje, or Angola um, versions. And weirdly enough, you see this in a lot of different things culturally as well. Um, I know I did a bit of a study at one stage on capoeira, which is the martial arts, which is really amazing to see, and it's very interesting. Um, but there again, you will see, dependent on which specific West African tribe the origin was, they will speak of Angola in its a style, and Ketu and Jeje turn up there as well. So it seems that there's a number of influences that culturally matter within Keroble as well. Now, interestingly as well, originally it was pretty much what we can refer to as a black religion. Originally, it then became a black and indigenous religion, but these days it's absolutely across the board, and you will find people from all ethnicities that follow it. So it has been growing and it does spread across. Um, these days, Keroble is considered Neo-African or African American as a religion rather than an African religion. And I'm going to throw it out there that I do find this in some ways an interesting aspect that many of the black people in America, North and South, insist on being called African American. Um, there's definitely a cultural thing going on there that they always hark back to the old country, so to speak. They haven't settled down to say that, okay, so yes, we have our roots back there, but we are Americans. It's always African American, which may say something about the views that they have and possibly about the views that other people have of them. And it's certainly formative uh, on society. Um, and so Keroble is considered to be a sister religion to, as we have said, both Cuban Santeria and Haitian Voodoo. So there's a lot of things that are um, connected here. We know that the followers of Keroble are considered to be the Povo de Santo, the people of saints, which is interesting as well. Though they are also referred to as Queroblecistas, um, it probably comes from an old Bantu word that means a dancer, candombele, which developed into the uh, term for the dance style in Argentina and Uruguay, candombe. Another word sometimes applied to the Kiroble is Macumba, as we know, but they're considered to be the bad ones. It's not centralized or institutionalized, so it varies a great deal. We do have specific healers, and the healers do a lot of the good stuff, but we also have the bad ones. Um, No, that's a very interesting point. Endless thoughts, and one which I've often wondered, because if you were to ask me what I am, I would tell you I'm an African. I was born in Africa, I grew up in Africa, I was raised in Africa. So to me, I'm African. I do have family that are very much English. And people will say, but don't you think of yourself as English? And I'm like, no, I have very little in common with my family out that side. I don't even know half of them. So it makes it very confusing on many ways to try to understand the need to be both. Um, this is what I am, and I am this. But there must be something to it, and I would love one day for someone to explain it to me and uncover a lot of the uh, things in regard. Um, you've never been outside of South Africa. I have, a couple of times, and I remember it's actually quite funny. I was 8. I went to England for the first time, and I met a couple of my cousins. And my first thing I said upon seeing them was to my mother, I said, "Are they sick? They're so white." And I was shocked. I thought that they were ill because I'd never seen anybody that white before. Which in and of itself is probably the funniest thing ever. A white person thinking that somebody else is so white, but it really was true. I don't know. It's just one of those things, I suppose. Um, and I didn't like it there. I didn't like the land. I didn't like the cities. I didn't like the people. I didn't understand half of them. Um, it confused me. You're from German descent. Okay, that's really cool. From what I understand, my family is mixed. I am largely Cockney on my father's side. So Romanian and Romany Gypsy mixed with Irish on that side. And then on my mother's side, very much um, going back to the Anglo-Saxon uh, sort of, and from that Chthonic, if not Germanic. And that shows in that, well, I don't have any hair anymore, but I used to have very, very white hair. I was, along with my brother, we were called the Snowball Children because we had white hair and blue eyes. Um, so there's certainly a Chthonic root on my mother's side, which is interesting. So the interesting thing with Grobler is that largely it's Roman Catholic in its that side of things. Um, and there are even those particular groups within Grobler that will refuse to initiate anyone who is not baptized as a Roman Catholic. However, some of them, instead of Roman Catholicism, have come from evangelical Protestantism, certain New Age practices, or even Buddhism, which obviously, as you can imagine, will change how it is practiced to a reasonable degree. There are certain small groups that actually have within them a Mahayana Buddhist deity. Um, some have Welsh or Slavic mythologies in their practice. And of course, we know that Spiritism, which is a French version of spiritualism, also has quite a bit of influence there. Um, Great grandmother moved here sometime in World War One. That's actually very interesting. My old landlord came over himself um, just after World War Two from Germany, an amazing guy, and all sorts of interesting stories there. So I can imagine it was quite a big deal, especially for a woman in those days, to make the trip out, and I'm sure she had wonderful reasons. But times have changed hugely, and I know for a fact that when my parents decided to come over, they absolutely were um, told straight up by the rest of the family, "You're going into darkest Africa. You're going to get eaten by a lion." I mean, it's terrible. Now, on my side, my name is Bones, of course. It's actually originally Allibone, and it's a derivation of Albion, which is the old name for England. But on my mother's side, we have the very exciting surname of Smith, um, which is hilarious. But yes, in my ancestry, there were quite important blacksmiths in my family, or smiths of some variety, different ones. So definitely, the family history is very, very important. And in fact, on my mother's side, we're related to the St. John Smiths, which, believe it or not, in my ancestry, I have an Anglican saint. I have two known witches, one of whom I believe was executed for witchcraft. Um, we have a number of very weird people, and even I think a criminal, but quite a famous one. I forget it all now. There was a whole collection in that regard on my mother's side. They're quite high society these days, I believe. I'm not. But then my mother foolishly married my father, who, as I say, um, was Cockney. And that alone is a whole mix of very, very interesting and horribly low class people, but very colorful and awesome. And I know that I had trouble understanding a number of my family, just trying to talk to them, because their language, what I call English and what you call English, is not what they call English. Um, Cockney English is a terrifying language to try to understand. Even before you get into the rhyming slang, the accent alone is hilarious. So this is one of the reasons why, in fact, this trying to understand what a witch was or is so difficult, because the meanings of the words in the different languages make the entire thing very, very uh, difficult in that regard. But it makes it interesting. Now, Kiroble divides in traditions known as nations, nations, quite literally. So your most prominent nations are the Nago or Ketu, the Jeje or Gege, and the Angola or Congo Angola, which include the Ijesha, Egba, and Efan, and Caboclo. Each derives from the influence of a different African language group. Ketu uses Yoruba, Jeje adopts Iwe, Angola is very much the Bantu language group, and therefore will have similarities in certain aspects to the Zulu views on things, which is quite interesting. Um, each linguistic or ethno-linguistic origin within the Kiroble nation has its own lexicon, chants, deities, sacred objects, and traditional knowledge. Uh, Although originating from different ethnic groups, this has um, eroded over time. So, whereas before you joined the nation that was your nation, these days that's basically gone, and you join a nation because of reasons other than your ethnic ancestry, which many people might not know anymore. Um, you can transfer from one nation to another, which is known as trocar de aguas, to change the waters, and attitudes between the nations can sometimes be negative. Um, those groups which emphasize claims to African purity have often denigrated the other nations that they deem more syncretic. The most syncretic is apparently the Angola nation. Um, the Nago is the largest, showing how Yoruba traditional religion became the dominant West African influence in the Afro Brazilian religions. Uh, so there's definitely a strong connection there. That's very much the general viewpoint of a lot of people, but not necessarily the truth. It does depend. So, as I said, a neo pagan Wiccan will tell you that a witch does good things. But if you ask quite a lot of the Christian groups what they think of it, they'll tell you straight up a witch does only bad things. And you see the same here. The Catholic Church basically says that all of the Kiroble is absolutely evil. It's bad. It shouldn't be. It's devil worship, straight up. But within they will tell you quite otherwise. Though even within they do say that there are those who use it for bad. So your different orishas are all quite important. Your Oshala, the main boiki, is the head honcho, the creator god as such. But the other ones have a hierarchy, and some are more and less important, dependent thereof. So he has two wives, Nana and Lemanja, and the trio are associated with water. Ashala with fresh water, Nana with rain, and Eamenja with the ocean. Other accounts present this cosmogony differently. And some say that Oshala fathered all the Orishas alone, creating them from nothing, and the world from a mingau pudding. But it does depend, as I say, things change according to the types and kinds. Now, you will find, for example, that the specific saints also matter. So Omolu, the Orisha of sickness, is often equated with Saint Lazarus, the leper. Oshala with Our Lord of Bomfin. Oshun with Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception. Ogum with St. Anthony of Padua. And due to his connection with time, Tempo is often seen as the Holy Spirit. So this matters as well, and you will find variants where different groups will tell you, no, it's the other one, not that one. But as the Abrushas will tell you, the importance is not the thing at all, but rather the power. I'm going to throw it out there. So Endless Thoughts has asked, do more people practice white rather than black magic? So for positive outcomes. I'm going to say yes, because it seems that the aim of dealing with the Orishas, for the most part, is to improve one's own life, to get positive outcomes in love, in family, at work, and all the rest of that. So, absolutely, there's a lot that goes on for that. Having said that, though, you might argue that it's also considered to be fine to get at somebody else. So, how much is it done, and will a Borussia do it for you? Will depend, and will it be admitted to? Is another important question. So, I think by and large, it's mostly good. But there are cases where it's not, and we are going to get to that in a little bit. One of the things that is very important is your own personal Orisha, one that influences your life and personality, and what is referred to of the dono da cabeza, the owner of the person's head. The gender of the Orisha is not necessarily the same as their humans, but it can be ascertained by divination. And if you don't know your own Orisha, it's sometimes considered to be something that will literally cause you to have mental illness. Depending on the Orisha in question, an initiate may choose to avoid or to engage in certain activities. Um, so you might not eat certain foods, wear certain colors, etc., because of your Orisha. Some practitioners also believe that uh, in further Orisha linked to an individual, a second one can be done, known as a junto, and a third known as the adjunto, um, where usually up to three, some even four, where the fourth one is an inherited one from a deceased relative, which is quite interesting. Now, another spirit group within the Kerobe worldview are the Eshus, um, or the Eshuas, a female. And if you're a child, Eshumirims. They are deemed closer to humanity than the Orishas and therefore much more accessible. They are often regarded as the slaves of the Orishas, and in common parlance, they are sometimes described as devils. But in Kiroble, keep in mind, here is another of the word problems we have, where in English, if it's devil, it's bad. But in Kiroble, it's not necessarily evil, but capable of good and bad. Practitioners believe that the issues can open and close the roads of fate in one's life and bring about both help and harm. And Kiroble teaches the issues can be used to influence um, the practitioner's life and can be induced to do their bidding, but they do need to be very carefully controlled. The issues are recorded as having been part of Keroble since the 1930s or even earlier. Also are the Caboclos, the name probably deriving from the Tupi language, Kanboka, deriving from the white. These spirits, especially those of the indigenous Americans, such as the boyaderos, the backwoodsmen or cowboys, and in rarer cases, they might be considered as coming from the sea or from foreign countries. They're almost entirely male, and they are believed to dwell in the forest land of the Aruanda, and are characterized as smoking cigars and favoring beer. I could be one of these. They're very important, especially in the Caboclo nation of Kiroble. The tradition has long been denigrated by the other traditions, especially from the Nago tradition, and many practitioners reject interaction with them, especially those who've tried to re-Africanize Kiroble since the late 20th century, and who reject them as a non-African derivation. And as a result, some have venerated the Orishas, but only engaged the lesser spirits on the quiet at home, shall we say. So, depending on what tradition you come to, will pretty much say whether or not you believe in these, will work with them, or anything like that. Some of them have tried to make them more African. Doesn't work so good, apparently, and it's a bit of an argument. Now, you do get a number of other spirits that are important, including, for example, the spirits of the dead, because death is the realm of Iku. Now, the material world of humanity is Ae, whereas Orun is the realm of the spirits and has 9 levels. Iku, the personification of death, is the one who controls death, and the spirits of the dead are Eguns. The recently deceased are termed Aparasa, after they have been educated by receiving sacrifices, though they become Baba. After death, and the Egun can enter Orun, although the level they reach depends on the spiritual growth they attained in life. And sometimes the Eguns will seek to help the living, but they can also harm them. Given the potential for harm, Keroble stresses the precautions in dealing with these entities, and contact with the Egun is accompanied by rituals to neutralize their harmful power or pollution. The Contra Egun is an armband made of plated raffia, which is sometimes worn to ward off dead spirits. Although thought possible, possession by these Eguns is considered rare, and it's generally discouraged by most Keroble groups, who deem it as spiritually polluting, a viewpoint that distinguishes Keroble from Umbanda. So again, you see differences that are quite important. Now, the interesting thing in Keroble, sorry, my eyes are drying a bit from screen staring. Keroble teaches the existence of a force called Ashe, a central concept in Yoruba-derived traditions, which is the spiritual force of the universe. And I suppose in many ways this is a lot like the concept of mana, or vital force, vital energy. And practitioners believe Ashe can move, but it can also concentrate in specific objects like leaves, roots, and certain body parts. Blood, in particular, is considered to contain a very concentrated form of Ashe, and you can actually accumulate Ashe, but also lose it or transfer it. And this force is expressed through songs, prayers, and speech. Specific rituals and obligations are believed to maintain and enhance a person's Ashe, while other ritual acts designed to attract or to share this force. Dende, a sacred palm oil, is used to cook ritual meals and is considered to be a materialized form of Ashe. So you can actually do these things and gain power. Now, you were asking about, is it more good or more bad? Well, the ritual aspect within Keroble, being a practice-orientated religion, ritual correctness is considered more important than belief. Rituals often focus on pragmatic issues regarding prosperity, health, love, and fecundity. Those engaging in Keroble include various initiates of varying degrees and non-initiates who may attend events and approach the initiates looking for help in various problems. It is an initiatory religion, so it's organized around a more structured hierarchy based on your status. Knowledge about the beliefs and practices is referred to as fundamentos, the foundations, and it's guarded by the practitioners. It makes use of secrecy. So it is in a sense a secret society or secret religion, which we see in a number of different witchcraft traditions. Um, Most of the terms are used in ritual context are African derived, and in general, words of Yoruba origin predominate in some of the nations, whereas Ewe, Fon languages in others, or Bantu in particularly the Angola nation. The houses of worship are known as tereos. Um, and some of them are very small and some of them are pretty impressive, I will say that. So they vary greatly dependent on the level of um, money within the society. We know that within each terreo, the floor is deemed sacred and consecrated to the tutelary orisha of the house. It will have a kumeria, a central pole within the structure believed to link the humanity's world with that of the Orishas. The, this stands above the entorto, the foundation of the terreo, a space periodically fed with offerings. An outdoor enclosure may have a tree dedicated to Tempo, because he's another important one. Shrines to forest orishas like Oshosi and Ogun, and a Bale, a place set aside for the souls of the dead. Plants used in rituals may also be grown in the outdoor areas, and public ceremonies take place there where both initiates and non initiates can attend to celebrate the Orishas. You're expected to wear white if you go there, and they often begin long after the advertised starting time. It's African time. We know all about that, South Africa. Food is offered to specific orishas and shared among participants, um, thus allowing the participants to gain some of the share of the orishas. Public rites are preceded and succeeded by private ritual acts, and many of the rituals that take place are in fact private and only open to initiates. There is also a collection of important objects within there that are used as sacred objects or asamentos, in which the Orisha lives, and they are stored in the bakise inside the terreo. There is a priesthood of the higher initiated beings, and there are lots of rules that surround what you may and may not do and how and all the rest of it. Um, and it can get very complicated. And as you can imagine, sometimes uh, it involves a certain amount of community status as well, which I think is quite important. Now, within it, you will have the main father of saints, but you will also have others that assist the little mother and little father. Um, so you have a number of roles: the Iabase that prepares the food for the Orishas, the Alabe, the musical director. Initiates are called filios, uh, sons, or filias de santo, the daughters of the saints, and they assist as cooks, cleaners, gardeners, and more. Women initiates who do not enter trance but assist are called ikedi, and the male counterparts ogan. The oga are male members, often not initiated, is simply part of the community. So there's a lot of standing in how it works, and the different shrines, often with sacred stones that are highly decorated and more. Um, so there's a huge number of things involved. So what do they give? Offerings are known as ebos, and they consist of food, drink, fowl, and money. And when animal sacrifice is not involved, a food offering is termed a comida seca. These offerings are believed to generate ashe, which gives the Orisha the power to aid their worshippers. Um, Traditionally, when ceremony starts, they provide a pade, a preparatory offering to the Orisha Eshu, just to begin things off. Food plays a huge role, and we know this is true in South Africa as well. Um, Food is very important in any gathering, and who gets what when matters greatly. So you will have to uh, know how these things go. Now, when it comes to doing sacrifice, Keroble does involve animal sacrifice, which is called balansas, and the individual doing it is the ashogun, um, and sometimes it's just called a faca, which is the Portuguese for a knife. Um, Usually it's chicken, guinea fowl, white doves, and goats, and will have to have its neck cut by the knife or entirely severed. The blood is put on the altars, the organs are often removed and arranged around the Orisha's seat. Um, so the sacrifice is important because then you must do a divination to see if the sacrifice was acceptable. Um, the participants often will eat the sacrifice, but not necessarily all of it. If the sacrifice was for the iguns, which it is then left to either rot or be placed in a river. Some of the food may be taken to the forest or thrown into a body of water or placed at crossroads um, because varying different orishas um, have to be treated differently. The problem comes in when outside of Brazil you try to do any of this because in a number of countries, any kind of animal slaughter that is not done within very, very strict rules is illegal. So you're not allowed to do this at all. Just know. Um, so they have issues in this regard. Um, Now, we're going to jump from there to talk about Maria de Conceição, who was a known Brazilian witch. And she was active as what is known as a cunning woman. Remember that term because it turns up in a number of other places as well around the world. She was known for her great knowledge of medicinal herbs, which she used to manufacture medicine for use in her work as a herbalist physician. She came into a conflict with a priest, Father Luis, who opposed herbal medicine. The priest accused her of heresy and witchcraft, and she was put on trial in accordance with Portuguese law against witchcraft. She was judged guilty as charged and executed by burning in 1798, which is something that was no longer done at that time in Europe, but still occurred in the Latin Americas. So, as you can see, it can lead to problems, which could very much cause difficulties for you. So, whether or not you're allowed to practice the varying forms of the craft depends on where you are quite a lot. Within Brazil, it's kind of acceptable, so fine. Not everybody likes it, but it's a done deal, so to speak. Um, that said, apparently it's huge on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and is pretty much a thing around the world. But a bruxa is still a witch, and many people still consider witches to be bad. So trying to understand what is being spoken of and why, um, well, it really does depend. We know that Spiritism has affected, uh, which is a French, uh, I'm going to say a kind of necromancy in the proper meaning of the word necromancy, uh, which is something that um, needs to be considered in that regard, at the very least. We know that there are quite a few um, different stories surrounding the good and the bad. Um, and the fact that Wicca has turned up there now is almost late to the party. Is meditation magic? Medication magic? Well, that's that. You see, this is the whole big argument. Um, the all original medicine was herbal. The fact that we now synthesize and such is just a modern version thereof. So most, well, in many ways, all medicines originate with a herbal equivalent way back when. So modern medicine, no. Modern herbal medicine, also generally no. But if you go back a bit and look at traditional herbal medicine, I mean, if you've ever read the Bleach Book of Bald, for example, which is an English herbal medical text, um, they use a number of things for uh, diseases and such that really and truly are supernatural rather than physical. And you may find that things like ground emerald features even in potions that are made. So there are links, can I say that, which matters greatly. There are connections to it. So the answer is both yes, no, and maybe in that regard. And I think that to consider herbal medicine to be evil and bad because it's witchcraft is actually just showing how little people know themselves and that they are being quite stupid. That's just me. And I shall have to punish myself for being rude about it, but sometimes I do worry about people. Um, as we know that there are additions with neo-paganism, of course, um, nowadays, but it seems the main form of magic and witchcraft is Candomblé in Brazil. And we're going to talk about Maria Perpetua, uh, who was born in Portugal, actually, but passed on in Ilha de São Sebastião. And according to what we are told, is cough syrup a potion? Absolutely is. Remember that a potion just means a liquid concoction designed as a medication, something you can drink to achieve an end. So cough syrup is absolutely a potion. So Maria Perpetua was a Brazilian witch, and she was the central figure in a famous murder case in Brazil. So she was born in Portugal and emigrated to Brazil, where she settled in the island of Saint Sebastian. She came to be infamous for both witchcraft and devil worship. But remember, again, we are not saying she did those things. She was said to, which might be quite important. Um, And from around 1812, the parish received complaints about her practice in witchcraft. Among her accusers was a Captain Domingos, who was one of the most notable slave traders in the region. In a famous case, she was accused of having murdered a slave, Joanna, by the use of magic. Dominguez, as well as several other parishioners, laid a formal complaint to the local priest, alleging that she had manufactured magical objects to create the illness which killed Joanna. When the governor of Sao Paulo allowed the residence of Maria to be searched, several magic objects allegedly made to practice magic were found, among them also a human ear, and so she was stabbed to death by her own spouse before she even went to trial. So, as you can see, it's not necessarily a good thing to be thought of as a witch. So there are obviously a lot of problems. Most of the hardcore Christian groups outside will tell you it's devil worship. Most of those within will say to you, no, it's got nothing to do with that. What's your problem? We know that they all have a lot of differences in terms of names, gods, language, the way you say things, what you do, and so on and so forth. We know that the Haitian voodoo speaks of loas, whereas in Kidoble they talk about orishas, same but different. We know that the language specific does matter. You need a healing potion. Your nose is just be warned. There's a really awful flu going around at the moment. Do not mess with it because it hits you very suddenly and hard. And the moment you get the slightest indication of something, you definitely need a potion. ACC 200 is a particularly good potion. It might not be magical, but damned it works. So I would advise dealing with that very quickly, as in like tomorrow, the moment you can. Now, closing off our view of these things, while witchcraft itself in Brazil is not a crime, certain practices associated with it can lead to criminal charges, especially when they involve fraud, harm, or exploitation. Historically, Brazil has regulated the practice for magic and faith healing, and while the death penalties for sorcerers were not common, there has been measures taken to combat harmful practices, which I do think is a very forward-thinking way of doing things. There is no specific law directly criminalizing the witchcraft, though. But if you do a crime, even through witchcraft, you could get criminal charges, whatever that crime might be. So it regulates all of the practices through decrees and legal codes, especially in the context of the religious and spiritual practices, mainly to stop you committing fraud by and large. Modern Brazilian penal code includes articles addressing the illegal practice of medicine and the use of magic for harmful purposes. In extreme cases where it goes really quite criminal, witchcraft beliefs sometimes used to exploit and traffic individuals, making them vulnerable to human rights violations. This is illegal. Practitioners sometimes deceive individuals by claiming to have supernatural powers or promising to solve problems through magic, and they could face charges related to fraud. If witchcraft practices are used to incite violence or cause harm to individuals, those involved can be held criminally liable. That said, there is a very diverse religious landscape with strong core beliefs and spiritual forces that include witchcraft and spiritism in Brazil, and individuals in vulnerable social situations, such as those facing poverty or lack of opportunity, can be particularly susceptible to manipulation and exploitation through witchcraft beliefs. A growth of evangelical churches in Brazil has also influenced the discussion around witchcraft, with some churches actively combating perceived harmful practices. Basically, you're a devil worshipper and therefore must be stopped. Whether or not any of this is true is a matter of opinion, but at least we can say and should say that you are not allowed to commit a crime even if you do it via magic. So right there. So you need to get your ashe up, and a properly used candle appears to be the way to go, because it definitely will assist. Now, in general, Candomblé is a much maligned religion, and it receives a lot of unnecessary hate. It is very much a weird one from the point of view of much of society. But just because it's different, it doesn't mean it's not a good thing at all. So we can do evil through religion in a great many ways. There is no reason why you can't be a bad person in any religion. Is mana an actual thing? Okay, I believe it is. Now I'm going to qualify my answer by saying I'm using it in the general term, because if you actually go to its origin, it comes from the Hawaiian Islands, and they are very, very specific about what they're talking about in terms of what mana is and how it works and the different kinds of mana and so on and so on. And in that sense, you are getting very particular. But if you are talking about mana in the sense of spiritual energy, which can be used in spiritual ways, I believe it is. How exactly it works is going to depend on your belief system. Why it's important is going to depend on your belief system. I think it is not the same as, but it is linked to your life force. I would say it is a manifestation of the soul, so to speak. But how exactly it works and why it affects things in different ways is going to depend on what you believe, and that's going to be a very big thing. I have a whole treatise that I got with an incredibly good explanation of it in the original proper context, the Hawaiian context. And I have to tell you that I understood about a third of it. It's really complicated, and you do need to really understand the culture and more to know which bits work where and how and why. So it's a very, very big deal in that regard. And it's not a simple thing. Now, the Candomblé Ashe is kind of more related, I would say, to the viewpoint that is held in Africa, particularly among the Bantu tribes, whereby it's a power. that may or may not be granted unto you, dependent on how you've improved your spiritual standing. It's related to the ancestors and what their connection to you are and to the spirits. It can be used to achieve good and bad, to heal or harm. But you will find it depends on the specific cultural group as to exactly how it works in that regard. I have been learning about it for about 30 years, and I still don't understand it all. So it's a very complex thing, but I do think it is real. I think that spiritual power definitely is a thing. You know how you can meet somebody and they've just got that certain presence. You can tell they are something more. That's an example of mana in action, I think. I believe that human beings are comprised of more than just the physical. That's my opinion. But not to say that the physical isn't very, very important. I think that is another mistake that many religions make in dismissing the physical as not important. Whether or not it is important after we pass on to the next world is arguable, but while we are here, it matters greatly. We are body, mind, and soul, and a combination thereof that matters, and the different aspects absolutely do matter. So your spiritual power and strength is just as important as your physical health and strength, and your mental health and strength. And all of them are important in that regard. So, yes, I think it is real. I think it's important, and I think it's the kind of thing we should know about and don't. I strongly suspect that humanity as a whole, in general, are pretty damn ignorant about most things beyond the physical. We're better with the mental than with the spiritual, but even there, we are badly not progressed, and we definitely do need a lot more understanding in that regard. I think it would be fair to say that if reincarnation is real and it's all about moving up the spiritual ladder, a great many of us are still not far above the level of cockroach. So, in that regard, we have a lot of work to do. I don't know. What do you think? Do you believe it's real? What do you guys think? Give us a comment. Tell us what you think. I would be very interested to know. I see that Lily and Kiki are there and are being very quiet. But tell us, um, and any of you in the list there, tell us your opinions. Is mana a thing in the general sense of what mana is? Um, do you believe it's real? Do you think it's important? Does it matter? Or are we flirting with the devil, as a great many people have told me in my life? To even think about or read about stuff, I'm a bad person and I will probably go to hell. God does not love me, I've been told. Um, but generally, I don't really care. I'm curious about everything and I work very, very hard to learn as much as I can. So, those who don't like learning, I feel sorry for. I think that learning matters. Sorry, it's just my way of viewing the world. But yeah, tell me what you think. And for that matter, the other big question we need answering is where are we going to go next? And I have a suspicion in my crusty little heart that we are going to have to pick a good one. Yes, you've also been told you hate God for asking questions. And I wonder how much of that is projection by the one saying it. I remember I got taken out really harshly by an actual group of people. And I turned around and I looked them straight in the face and I said to them, "So your God is so unbelievably weak that he cannot stand up to a single question? How sad for you." And they were furious. I nearly started a riot with that one. I said, if God is God, then I am certain he is quite capable of handling a mere question from a simple human being. And if he can't, he's not worthy of being a god. Apparently, this is not a good answer, especially not when you are in class in a seminary with several important priests. Yeah. I did not improve my life on that day, but I did have a damned good laugh. And I also turned around and said to the same people, "Who the hell do you think you are that you are better than God?" And they were like, "What do you mean? We didn't say that." I said, "Well, you're telling me what God can and can't do, so clearly you're more important. I'm just asking questions. You're telling him what to do." And of course, that did not go down well at all. But you see, that's the problem with a lot of religion, is you're not allowed to ask questions. And sadly, I was born asking questions. I think I'm almost certain, I have no proof of it, but I'm almost certain my first word I ever spoke was why, because I want to know. And one of the reasons why I ended up leaving formal religion is because I had so many questions that either they couldn't answer or that they turned around and told me straight, "You're not allowed to ask that." To which I said, "Well, in that case, you're no good to me. I need answers. I have questions. If you cannot or will not answer them, then you're not good enough. Sorry." I believe that in life we are supposed to improve ourselves physically, improve ourselves mentally, and improve ourselves spiritually. All three are important. And if you do not appreciate, use, and do all those things, then really you're wasting your life. And Endless Thoughts, I believe that that is absolutely the correct mode forward. She says, "I always ask questions. I have questions for my questions, and then I have questions for the answers." And I think that is the only way to live. An unexamined life, says Plato, is not worth living. And he was right. Also, I suspect that the other point, and I'm not sure if I've got the correct phraseology, but I think I have, nemo quod non dat habet. You cannot give what you have not got. And that is a failing of a great many so-called religious leaders, a great many leaders in general. They simply haven't got to give, and therefore they say, "Oh, but you can't question that." Well, in that case, you're ignorant. Go away. I will find somebody who will give me answers. I can honestly tell you that some of the greatest things I have learnt came from the Temple of Hanuman in Durban. I learnt an incredible amount from the Temple of Ganesha in Boksburg. I have gone and spoken to some amazing Jewish rabbis and learnt great things. I have learnt a lot from Catholic priests and scholars as well. And some of my favorite stuff I learnt from one of the top Isangoma in the Valley of 1,000 Hills in Natal. So, I will go where the answers can be given, and I will test those answers with even more questions, because that is what makes life worth living. But having said that, our next question, of course, is where shall we go next? And I'm debating. I think that it's very possible we should consider not very educated, I call you a liar, my dear, because while you might not be formally so, you are absolutely educated in a great many things and know far more than many of the so-called educated people. So keep up what you're doing. You're doing better than them. You know, they asked me why I never went on to uh, do my master's degree. And I told them straight that the reason was you didn't want to know what I think. You wanted me to know how much I've read of other people's thoughts. If a, a final degree is reliant on somebody else's work, it's not worth having. Yes, draw on their knowledge, but you must put your own views forward. And many of the dissertations are literally nothing. Modern learning has died a terrible death, which is pandering only to old views, and I am against it entirely. Modern thought should be forward thinking, and therefore I have come to feel that the number of degrees doesn't necessarily make the person. But if anybody is arguing, yes, I have got a couple of them. I just stopped bothering after a while and did life stuff. So thought experiments are very important, and improving oneself in that regard. Always be willing to learn. So for our next live, unless somebody sends me a suitable reason to go otherwise, I have a feeling I might look into England. England might be good. There's some good witches in England, and I'm related to them. So maybe that will be where we go. And we can talk about the strange and awful evil of the Pendle witches and similar such topics. What do you think? Sound good? I think that will do very nicely indeed, and possibly improve our ideas, and if nothing else, be interesting. And of course, this is old style witchcraft, which isn't all fluffy bunnies and rainbow glitter. And yes, hangings, not burnings. Everyone talks about the burning times, which is rubbish. Very, very few witches were burnt, except in Germany. They like to do it in Germany. Most witches were either hung, pressed, or drowned. And we shall attend to such things in the next live. But for now, we have been on for over 2 hours, and it has been a wonderful experience. I appreciate you all. You are all wonderful, and it has been a huge amount of fun. So come back again for the next one at 10 o'clock South African time. That's GMT +2. And bring friends, bring comments, bring questions. There is so much we can learn, and I will do my best to answer as best I can. But until then, I bid you all sleep deep, sleep sweet, but sleep with one eye open, and keep that holy object near at hand, because you never know. Those things that go bump in the night might very well go bump for you.